Okay, I'm going to do this video that people have been requesting me to tell my story, and so I'm going to attempt to do it tonight, Sunday night. Just had a rainstorm here, so it's nice and cool out. And so beginning in the very beginning, I was born in Newark, New Jersey. Thankfully, my parents moved us out of there when I was 2 years old to Connecticut. Somehow they ended up in the poverty realm, and we ended up eventually moving into government housing, and that was in Hartford, Connecticut, in Rice Heights. We lived at 410 Flatbush Avenue for a while, then 404, and then 310 Flatbush, and not a good neighborhood. And as things were, we were the minority, being a white family. I think there were only 2 other white families there. So this was during the 60s, and the instigation on the blacks for rioting was in full force. I grew up with my brothers and my 2 sisters having a lot of animosity towards the blacks and Puerto Ricans, since you could barely walk anywhere by yourself, or 1 or 2 of you, because there are always like 10 or 13 of them somewhere. So I grew up pretty prejudiced at that time, yet at the same time, next door was a family, and Michael Davis was my age, and we were little kids just playing together, and there was another black kid not too far away that I would play with. But in my mind, I really hated the gangs, the thug life, all that. And I did see enough of abuse on girls, women, and that always turned me off heavily. But in any case, you end up always looking over your shoulder when you're in a place like that, which actually isn't a bad thing. So anyway, I end up at about the age of 12, we moved out of that government housing. By the way, we were so poor then, we didn't have a car, we didn't have a TV, and you know what? I don't miss having not having a TV. Yeah, as a kid you want it, but probably was a good thing not having it. But I do remember eventually getting one, because I remember being sent home from school in 2nd grade the day that JFK was assassinated. Maybe I'll even get into that a little bit later on another video, because there's a whole lot of mind manipulation by the culprits that actually carried that out, which that's where they first came up with the term conspiracy theorist, by the way, to silence people that were questioning, how can this one guy with an old rifle accurately shoot JFK, So anyway, ended up moving out of the neighborhood, thankfully, about the age of 12, to Hillside Avenue, near Pope Park. And, I don't really remember a whole lot in my younger years. I remember more, much more, once we moved on to Hillside Avenue. And maybe that's because it was pretty dark in the projects, and maybe there's not a lot of good memories there anyway. Really, I don't remember anything good there. But in any case, life opened up somewhat, a whole lot better once we moved on to Hillside Avenue. But there were still the gangs that would infiltrate that area, and so the hatred actually for those people was very strong. And but anyway, this background will lead you to understand where I ended up with once I joined the military, Navy. So in any case, My father was a very, very difficult guy to get along with. Pretty much impossible to get along with him. And, you know, realizing his background during the Depression, being passed from one family to another, eventually ending up in the CC as a 16-year-old. He probably didn't grow up with a whole lot of love, so he didn't know how to love, that's for sure. He never once said, "I love you." And all he liked to do was be miserable, argue, drank every night. We got to the point where once and I found out years later that my mother's brother, my uncle, had lent them money for a down payment on the house. So once they moved into that house, my father worked days at the post office, my mother worked nights. So as soon as he got home, she went to work. She got home late at night, usually around 11:30, I'm guessing. So she slept during the mornings as much as she could. But we didn't have an easy life at home. And my father also always had this interest in ghosts and scary stories, that kind of thing. And for some reason, whether it was him or some other reason, weird stuff would happen in our house. Matter of fact, we had a really nice German Shepherd eventually, and that dog would not go down into that basement at all. You couldn't drag him down. And there were things I heard my other siblings talking about going on down there. I didn't ever hear anything, but there were other things that happened in the house. But in any case, we did find, when my father was tearing up the concrete floor in the basement to do a whole new, to tear out the coal bins and build a whole, you know, widen up the basement for other things we could store. So in any case, they found a gun buried underneath that concrete. So obviously somebody in that house had done something they didn't want to get found out for. Anyway, my father was not only hard to get along with and loved arguing, but you know, in regard to me being the oldest of 7, anytime I would ask him, like, "Dad, how do you do this?" And he'd say, "What's the matter with you? You can't figure that out yourself?" And anytime I wanted to do anything, like later years, like I wanted to buy when I was in high school, I wanted to buy a World War II Willys Jeep. He said, "What do you want to do that for?" And I said, "Dad, I want to have a vehicle." And he says, "You don't need a vehicle." And he said, "How are you going to pay it off?" I said, "Dad, I'll put a plow on it. I'll make money in the winter. And we're living in Connecticut." And he said, No, you'll never do that. You can't do that, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, he was really rough. And when I started working, well, paper routes early, and then probably about the age of 12-ish, once I entered high school, my other uncle, my mom's brother, Uncle Joe, he was an attorney. He took me out to the golf course, Weathersfield Country Club, and taught me how to caddy. So I made money doing that on weekends, but he took pretty much all that money. And then when I went in the Navy, he was actually wanting me to send home, which I did for 2 years. I sent home almost all the money I made. Years later, my mother told me, "I never felt like Dad was doing the right thing with you on that. He should have let you keep the money and buy the Jeep you wanted to buy." But see, my dad had a very dark cloud over his life. Probably choices he had made. But he's succeeding, really, because it made him look bad. And not only did he like arguing and telling me, "Oh, you can never do that," he would always ridicule me and that type of thing. And so I grew up, man, with first of all, I realized many years later I didn't grow up with wisdom, because my father never taught me wisdom because he didn't have any. And I didn't hate him. I just hated what he did, you know. But my brothers, Mike and Bill, they were like sons of thunder, you know. They were always getting in trouble. They would climb out of that second floor with sheets, go out during the night and get back in the morning. They were always getting in trouble. They were wild. They would call him Colonel Clink, you know. That's their opinion of him. But in any case, you know, by the time I was in high school, I got pretty fed up with the way I was treated by him, and just wanted to be accepted, but also was in a attitude of anger and rebellion. So of course I started drinking and smoking pot with other kids in the school, and going out and partying at night. And by the time I went in the Navy, we've been brought up Catholic, and by the time I went in the Navy, I was done with church, man. I said, you know what? I don't need church. I believe in God. That's all that matters. So I went in the Navy, started getting in trouble. Even in, well, boot camp, I can't remember for sure. But once I graduated boot camp and then went to A school for electricity and electronics, I started getting in trouble. Got busted for pot, got busted for dereliction of duty and forgery. And actually at the captain's mast, the captain looked at that thing that I forged, which was a seal that they would give so that you could go on leave. And I wanted to go home for Christmas. So they said, no, you're not going home. And so I made up this thing and I drew the whole seal and everything. And the captain looked at that and he goes, man, he said, this is really good. He said, I wouldn't have known this wasn't real, you know. But anyway, he asked me, well, do you want to get out of the Navy? And I said, no, I want to go to the fleet, you know. But in any case, jumping into that part when I went in the Navy, I pretty much didn't want anything to do with any more church. And I figured as long as I believed in God, that was enough for me. I feel like I'm missing something, though, about my father. But in any case, I couldn't wait to get out of the house. And so once I got in the Navy, I eventually... I was going to say one thing. During the time in the projects, my father, I found out years later, wanted to let me fight my way out of everything. But my mother always went out to break the fights up. And I would say right now, moms, let your boys fight their way out, okay? I grew up with fear because I always was like, where's mom? She's going to save me, you know? And so I wasn't a good fighter initially. And but I can remember during boot camp, there was this little white guy, and I call him a little white guy because he was a wise guy. And he always hung around the black guys talking smack like he was something else, you know. He was a pimp, and he was from Philly, I believe, and he was trying to impress them. Well, one day I didn't realize until after it happened, but he wanted his black guys to lock the doors behind him once he went into the head, which is the bathroom, where the showers were, which I had gone in to take a shower. Well, he had gone in there too. Well, once we were both in the shower, big, huge, you know, multi-shower heads, he starts talking crack to me, you know, and I told him, shut the hell up, you know. Well, before long, man, he came over to me and we started fighting all over the place. And since they had locked the doors so nobody could come in, we were fighting for a long time, man. And we went all the way out to where the sinks were. We were fighting all over the place. Now, he got me down on the ground, but I grabbed his dog tags and I was pounding him in the face. And I had those dog tags so tight that I had finger issues where, I forget which fingers it was now, but for years, man, I had no feeling in those fingers for a long time, like 2 years. But anyway, finally these guys bust in because they couldn't wait to see what was happening. And there was blood all over the place, man. I mean, we were both bloody as could be. And these black guys, man, they said, man, wash it off, man. You guys got to wash it off. So we're in there washing off all the blood. And the black guys are going, damn, man. I forget the other guy's name. Let's just say he's Philly Joe, whatever. They say, man, it's all Philly Joe's blood, man. It's all Philly Joe's blood. Giacomo, man, you know how to fight, man. Giacomo knows how to fight. They're all of a sudden, everybody's saying, and I was a quiet guy. I wasn't loud or anything, you know. They said, man, Giacomo knows how to fight, man. So, anyway, boot camp, and this was still during Vietnam, so they trained you well, and it was not easy. And I'll tell you what, man, I was solid coming out of boot camp. I was very well built, and it was all muscle. And I could tell stories some other time. But here's the deal. Went into the Navy, and here's the attitude. You know, this is during Vietnam, and there's the leftover hippie anti-establishment attitude, but there's also the new Navy, which the liberal progressive types were trying to institute a new Navy where they took away the crackerjack uniform and then they put us all in these monkey suits, we called them, which was the double-breasted dress suit, just like an officer with the combination cap, the officer's cap. Everybody was to have one, you know. Bunch of crap. We all preferred just going back to the crackerjack uniform, but no, it was the new Navy. And not only the new Navy, but they would have these officers coming out of officer training school that had the idea that they knew everything. You know, like one guy, he said, I got 4 years left. I don't know if I can make it, you know, and that was the consensus among the chiefs. So I grew up with a rebellious attitude to begin with. So once I started seeing certain officers that abused their power or, you know, for whatever reason, I didn't like them. And mostly it was abuse of power. Man, oh man, me and another guy, we started really giving them a hard time. And I would even do things like if I was walking down the pier and one of those officers was walking by, you had to salute him. Heck no, man, I'm going down and I'm tying my shoe. I'm not saluting that dude. So I had a big attitude problem. And in the Navy, more and more drugs were available. When I was in Great Lakes, Illinois at A school, I started doing acid with the other guys, hash. When I got out on the fleet, you know, you go to a place like, oh gosh, can't believe I can't remember the name of it now, Holland. You know, you go over there and you can go into these big buildings. They sell all kinds of drugs. You could buy whatever you want there. Of course, if you got caught in the Navy, that wasn't a good thing, but we had ways of not getting caught. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was drinking and drugging myself into more depression, but I didn't realize it. And I remember this other troublemaking guy and myself, we hung around a lot together, plotting ways to trip up officers and whatever. So anyway, we both became E4s, Petty Officer Third Class. And there was a volunteer guard force they kept saying, we want you to volunteer for. And we didn't want to because that would mean we'd have to go on guard duty when we could be sleeping, you know, or during the day, it's no problem. But at night, you know, you'll be doing guard duty at night. So we purposely flunked the test 2 times. And then the officer finally came down into our berthing department, our berthing compartment. And he stood on the ladder there while we both took the test. And we were chuckling at each other because we were answered all the questions wrong on purpose. And we were just like, well, what does this mean, you know? And we were asking each other really stupid questions to make the officer think we didn't know what was going on. And when we were done, we were just kind of smiling at each other like, oh, well, we just flunked it again. And the officer takes him and he goes, oh, good, you both passed. So we were screwed. And, of course, you know, yeah, we'd be helping our buddies, you know, but we didn't really want to be on guard duties. Anyway, so getting bad letters from home, how my brothers and sister would send letters, and my brother, I remember Mike or Bill, I think it was Mike, sent me a letter saying, man, you think Clink was bad when you were here. You should see how bad he is now. And then Susie went off to the Air Force. Billy quit high school. He joined the Air Force. Michael left home. He joined the Marines. Beth ran away even before anybody, I think. And I was kind of like getting depressed about the whole family falling apart. But also, you know, being negative in a lot of ways. I remember sometimes being out at sea and leaning over the railing and, you know, just looking out at the ocean and thinking, man, Saturday night back home, man, wonder what my buddies are doing. And here I am stuck out here in the middle of the ocean, you know, nothing to do, and just getting down on myself, you know. So eventually, being on guard duty, I would have never thought this would have happened, but now I'm going to enter this in as a little bit of information that might be relevant. Whatever you think, it doesn't matter. But that buddy of mine, Paul Meinstreifel, he was into, you know, a lot of music like Pink Floyd and everything. And we used to listen to that. And I learned later, supposedly, you can comment, say what you want, but I heard that, you know, Pink Floyd, they would actually loosen demons of suicide into their music. Well, he and I were talking about suicide. He was the one that started bringing it up. You know, we were talking about, yeah, we should do this, you know, we should do that and get it all over with, and kind of like joking about it at first, but then the thought started staying in your mind, you know, mine for sure. I think it was his too. But in any case, I remember on guard duty just being pissed off at a lot of things, and man, there's nobody around. Midnight to 4 a.m. I hated that because I could be sleeping, man. And it was hard to stay awake. I was like, and plus the fact you're pissed off because you're there and you don't want to be there. And I was guarding a forward missile house, and, you know, hardly anybody ever walking by. I mean, it's middle of the night, you know. And I remember, man, I don't know how the heck this happened, except you know what I mean. In a minute, I'll tell you. Man, I would take that 45 out, put the clip on, take it off, put it right up to my head. And I was thinking, man, all I got to do is pull this trigger right now, you know. And I go, man, I was a hair's breadth away from pulling that trigger a few times. And I remember getting cold, sweaty hands and going, man, I'm going crazy. Put the gun back in the holster. Like, wow, man, that was real close, you know. And so this happened a few times on midnight to 4 a.m. watch. Never told anybody. Nobody would ever guess that I was a candidate for suicide, because I was Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky, always fooling around, messing with people all the time. Really, the depression would hit when I was alone. No other time. Other than, you know, yeah, we're all complaining and F this, F the Navy, F this, F that, F you, you know. I mean, every other word out of our mouth was a cuss word. So anyway, one day we were up in the North Atlantic, and it was probably about 2 or 3 in the afternoon, I guess. And I was up on the 04 level, which is above the bridge, and nobody's allowed up there unless you work on radar. And since I worked on the missile radar that was up there, I was allowed up there. Any FT, fire control missile tech, was allowed up there. So I'm up there, and all of a sudden I see this guy climbing down the mast, you know. And I said, what are you doing up there? He said, oh, I work on a ship's radar. And I said, oh, okay. Well, I had seen him around the ship, but I didn't know what he did. His nickname was Catfish, last name Gaines. And I can't remember his first name. Hardly ever saw him on the ship, but I had seen him. Out of the blue, this guy starts talking to me about the Bible, Adam and Eve, God, and all this. And I'm like, oh, well, you're in the middle of nowhere, I guess. May as well listen. Nothing else to do. And so he started talking about how God created all of us in his image, and he created Adam and Eve to walk with him and talk with him like they did in the garden. And so he said, but, you know, Satan came in and he entered the serpent and he deceived Eve into disobeying God, because God said, you can eat of the fruit of any tree in the garden except this one tree. A lot of people say it's an apple. It's not an apple. It's whatever it was It was different from all the other trees, whatever. So that was the knowledge of good and evil that God did not want them to eat from. And the serpent was twisting what God said and deceived Eve. Then Adam ate also. And he said that, the devil, he said that, but, that's when the relationship was broken off between man and God. They used to openly walk and talk together. And from that point on, it was separated. Sin had entered in, and that separated man from God. But God always had a plan to bring man back into relationship. And that would be through Jesus Christ, his son, his only begotten son. So, anyway, so he said, the devil's the one that goes around trying to tell everybody that, convince everybody that God's the killjoy. But really, he's the killjoy. And hold on one second. I'm going to turn on this light here. All right, now, a little bit better, right? So he said, but really, he's the killjoy. And while he's talking to me, I'm facing the bow, he's facing me, and I see off to the starboard bow, I see the blackest clouds I ever saw in my life coming toward us. And I'm just kind of taking note of it and, not saying anything, but I'm listening to him. And then the wind starts kicking up. And about this time, he's saying things like that, the devil is the one that comes to deceive. The devil's the one that brings depression. The devil's the one that brings thoughts of suicide. And I'm thinking, how the heck does this guy know what I'm going through, And I mean, even today, I don't know how he came up with that. I don't have a clue. Maybe God was telling him to use those words. I have no clue. But anyway, while he's talking to me, the wind starts kicking up, and then he says, Jesus said that the devil comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. But I have come, meaning Jesus, I have come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. And when he said that, right in between us, there was like a vertical shaft, invisible, with screaming voices, screaming at the top of their lungs. And I'm talking brutal screams like, ah! I mean, so loud that, and I could tell there were three. How do I know? I don't know. There were three. And it was so loud that we had to yell across from each other. We were like, 2 feet across from each other. We had to yell at the top of our lungs to be heard. And I said, man, what is that? And he said, that's Satan trying to shut up the word of God. But I rebuke you, Satan, in the name of Jesus. And me knowing the devil was real, I mean, I was convinced of that already. And I said, yeah, F you, Satan, you SOB. And the guy just kind of looked at me and, but anyway, the wind started kicking up so bad, and then the rain, and it was like cutting you. And literally the wind started kicking up to the point where it literally was going to blow us off the deck. And I remember saying, man, can you believe this? I said, I'll bet you if I, spread my arms and fell forward, it would hold me up. Sure enough, man, I just did it. And I spread out my arms and I fell forward, and the wind was holding me up. So I said, man, let's go talk behind the smokestack, block the wind. I don't remember anything that was said except that I remember him giving me a Psalms, Proverbs, New Testament pocket-sized book. And I said, no, man, that's okay. I don't want it. He goes, no, I want you to have it. And I said, no, I don't want it. And he goes, no, I want you to have it. 5 times. I said no, because I'm thinking, man, I'm not religious. I'm not, I'm too cool, man. I'm not into that, I'm not going to read it. And since he finally, wouldn't take no for an answer, I thought, okay, well, shoot, I'll just stick it in my back pocket, not going to read it. And I didn't plan on reading it. And then one time, I'm going to say about a week and a half later, I was in my bunk, depressed, probably about, after midnight sometime, just in my bunk, lower of 3 bunks in the berthing compartment. And we slept in the most forward one, in the forecastle, underneath the, in the bow, which also, by the way, gave you the heck of a ride when you were in big storms, let me tell you. Also, one of the things about being on guard duty in the middle of the night, I remember, before I get back to the story, when you were in a big storm, man, you would be going up, it felt like 14 floors up in the air, and then you'd come all the way down and crash, and your head was like really wanting to explode. Your stomach was up in your throat, and you had the biggest headache you ever had in your life, man. And you literally wish you were dead, man. It was just like, I just wish I was dead. That's how bad that was. And I can tell you more stories later of storms and what happened, but here I am in my bunk, depressed. I turned on the bunk light, and there was that book right there. I just thought, oh, well, may as well read it, and I started reading it. And I'm obviously, first time I'm ever really reading the Bible. And I'm reading about all the things Jesus did, all the things he said and did, and good things he did, and then how they, falsely accused him and framed him, and how they, whipped him, beat him, spat on him, and the whole trial, which was illegal, by the way, in that culture by the Jews, and then how they killed him. And like, man, I read all that, and it was like first time I ever read it, and I had a tear running down my cheek, and I said, you know what, Jesus? I said, I believe in you, but I just can't live the way you want me to. And literally at that split second, man, all of a sudden it was like a flood of love came inside me. How do you know it was love? I don't know. All I know it was love. Probably because I was love starved as a kid. There was no such thing as love. My father never said, I love you, ever. There was no love. There was never a hug, and yet, man, when this love came in me, I was like, wow. And there was light all around me, but I couldn't see it with my natural eyes, but I could see it. And I remember jumping up out of that bunk, standing up. I'm going, man, what was that? I said, man, I got to tell somebody about this. And I started looking at each guy sleeping, man, looking at him. I'm looking over at each guy on both sides, thinking, who should I wake up and tell? And then I go, they'll never understand. It's a good thing, because they would have said, man, go back to sleep. You're having a nightmare, whatever. It's a good thing I didn't do that. But anyway, I never thought to tell the guy that gave me the book what happened. I don't know why. I have no clue. But from that point on, I loved going on that midnight to 4 a.m. watch, because whatever kind of watch it was, whether it was guard duty or making rounds and enter something in the logbook, I could read that book, do whatever I had to do, and just, man, it just made me feel so good, It gave me peace. I didn't have that before. And I don't know, it was maybe like there was love in there too, or whatever, I don't know. But I remember many months later being on guard duty at the aft missile house, and I was reading that book. All of a sudden I go, wow, I haven't had any depression or any suicidal thoughts ever since that thing happened, And I didn't know what happened. It took me years later, because by the time I got out of the Navy, started trucking and everything, and then I got off the road and started working at a gas station. I was reading the Bible every now and then, but long periods of time I wasn't. But then there came a time when I really did want to read it, study it. And I can't remember right now what the time frames were, but let's see. I drove for Midwestern Distribution for about a year on the road, running all 48 states. They were out of Kansas. And by the way, when I first got out of the Navy, like I said, I wouldn't go to church at all, ever. And I got out of the Navy, and man, I was so restless when I got out, man. I had 13 jobs in 1 year, and that includes 1 or 2 or 3 days at a job like, nope, this isn't for me. And what I really wanted to do was go trucking. That's basically it. So I got a job at one point, driving school bus, which I had done when I was in high school. That was another thing my father said, you'll never do, because I said, Dad, I want to drive school bus when you're 18. And I was 18 in January. He said, you can't do that. You'll never do that. That was another one of those things. Like I said, well, I am going to do it. And, you know, I finally got to the point when I was about that age, like, you know what? I'm not going to let him stop me. I'm going to do it anyway. But there's always been that blockage with me, like having to overcome the, I can't do this. It's always been there. And I've done a lot better with it, but you know, your childhood, a lot of things are very impressionable during those years. But anyway, got to the point where after I was in the Navy, I was driving for a company, running over the road hauling beer, and trying to remember how this story goes. Yeah, I had a real problem with the one of the owner's sons, who was in charge of dispatch, more or less, and I had it with him, man. I walked out, and then my van crapped out, and I couldn't drive anywhere to get a job, and I ended up doing what I thought was too far below me, because I'm Mr. Super Trucker, and I felt like that's the only thing I can do, really, that I want to do. And God was working on my pride, and I ended up getting a job with a taxi company in Manchester, where I was living with a buddy of mine. And the good part about it was I was driving a nice checker cab, and man, what a car that was. I would love to have one of those. But anyway, I found all this time to read the Bible and read books about the Bible and all that. And man, that started opening me up to share the gospel with all kinds of people, and just ended up being what was initially eating crow type of thing, where you're now going to be a lowly taxi driver. But God was working on my pride, and I started really falling in love with people that were in desperate, bad ways. I remember one guy I used to have to go pick up. He was in dialysis. I used to take him to dialysis, and he wasn't that old, man, 44 years old maybe. Very nice guy, slim guy, and he was in such awful shape. I just felt so bad, and I started getting my horizons expanded. There was this one lady that actually, it was Halloween night, man. They sent me to this lady's house to pick her up. I'm waiting outside. You know, I had dispatch call her. Of course, there's no cell phones back then. Man, she opens up that passenger door, and it was like a horror movie. Like, you know, you see her old lady with, I mean, growths all over her face, man. And it was like one of those movies where you go, nah, nah, nah. You know, I mean, it was like, whoa. After I dropped her off later, I said, don't you ever do something like that to me. And dispatch, I was telling them, and you could hear them all laughing. Like, I said, man, you should have warned me about that one, man. You know, but I ended up picking her up several times after that. You know, she would only go out at night because she looked terrible. But man, you know, I started seeing a lot of people that were really bad off, and, you know, picking up people for welfare things. And of course that night, I mean, I'd be glad to go out Friday, Saturday night, because, you know, you go to all the bars, pick up everybody, and some of them were pretty good tippers, you know. And but anyway, that was the beginning of getting rid of my pride. God had to work on that, and eventually I ended up going, got out of trucking. I did some more trucking after that, but then I got out of it for a while to go to auto mechanic school during the day and worked at a gas station at night. I got invited to a Bible study by a black customer. I used to talk to everybody. This black woman, very beautiful woman too. And in any case, I said, yeah, you know, I'd like to understand the Bible. I'm not going to church anywhere, you know, and wasn't planning on going. She just had a Bible study, so it ended up being at the YMCA. I'm the only white guy there. They're all black. And I'm like, oh, okay. You know, by that time I was already done with my prejudices pretty much, as far as, yeah, you know, I'm good with black people too, you know. And backing up a little bit, when I was in the Navy on that ship, when I first got to that ship, there was a real core of Black Panthers, and they were your fully brainwashed, anti-white, black thug troublemakers, and they hated us, we hated them. And maybe sometime I'll tell you a story, but in any case, they finally got off that ship. They you know, eventually just got out of the Navy, and then I was making good friends with black guys that were there, and I was cool with that, you know. And it got rid of the old hatred I had for a lot of the black people. Now, I will say, going through bad neighborhoods and all, there's always that initial, maybe you call it a defense mechanism. As soon as you see that type of person, whether they're black or white, Puerto Rican or Hispanic, it doesn't even matter. It's like immediate on your guard, and that part's good, but you have to watch out with the hatred part, you know. So anyway, here I am with all these black people at this YMCA. After a while, you know, I'm thinking, these people are all real happy, man. Are they in Amway or something? You know, because if they're in Amway, I don't want anything to do with this. So one day, after about 2 months of going to their Bible study, I just said to them, well, almost all ladies, because guys up in the north don't go to church that much, especially in black families, unfortunately. And I said, you all in Amway? I said, what? I said, are you in Amway? She goes, Amway? I said, yeah. You're not in Amway? She goes, no. I said, oh, good. She goes, they were like, why? I said, well, if you were all in Amway, I mean, I'd be gone out of here, that's all. Because I'd actually been in Amway about 2 years, and I got fed up with it, really. But in any case, by the way, I just found out something about Amway. Better watch who they're supporting right now. So, in that church, I started going. Pastor eventually asked me, were you ever born again? And I said, I don't really know. And I said, this thing happened in the Navy, and I told him about it. He said, yeah, that was being born again. So I basically look at it like this. I didn't say a prayer. When I read that Bible, and I had that experience with God, it was basically like the thief on the cross. There were two thieves being crucified with Jesus at that time, one on his left, one on his right, and they were both making fun of Jesus, you know, like, hey, why don't you get us off the cross? If you're the Son of God, you know, come on and get us down, you know. And of course the Pharisees, the ones that put him to death, were ridiculing him down below, along with all the idiots that followed them. And so one of the thieves, though, he said, you know what, you and me, to the other thief, he said, you and me, we're getting what we deserve, you know, but this man, he's done nothing wrong. He said, Jesus, will you remember me when you come into your kingdom? And Jesus said to him, truly, truly, I say to you, this very day you will be with me in paradise. In other words, he didn't say a prayer. It was his heart that mattered. It was like, you know what? I believe in you, Jesus. You know, will you take me? Basically, that's it. That was me. You know, here I am in that experience. You know, when I said, you know what, Jesus, you know, I said, I believe in you, but I just can't live the way you want me to, because here I am drinking and doing drugs, and every other word out of my mouth is a cuss word. And he took me, you know. And so I feel like it was very much like the thief on the cross. So in any case, I started going to that church actually on Sunday, and because I was too cool to do worship, I would just wait till the worship was over and I'd come in for the message. That's all I wanted to hear. Then eventually I started, you know, going in for the worship. And then the pastor of that church said, oh, there was one thing that I wanted to know a lot of things, because a lot of things had happened in my past where I spent probably an hour and a half, 2 hours, a couple times with that pastor, asking him all kinds of questions about ghosts and all these different things and weird things that happened at the house I was at. And he really cleared me up biblically, really helped me understand what was going on. So eventually he said, to the church, well, we're going to start going 2 by 2 into the worst parts of the city and sharing the gospel. And I thought, oh, no. I'm not going to be like a Jehovah's Witness or a Mormon. Nope. And I said, you know what, God, from now on, whatever you want me to do, I'll do. So I went to the classes. It took away all my fears and inhibitions because I saw it biblically. I saw it also from a military standpoint. This is spiritual warfare. We're going after the devil. And just like I was delivered out of the devil's filthy hands, we were going to go and rescue people out of the devil's hands. And man, I'm telling you, that catapulted me spiritually. Once I made that decision to do whatever God wanted me to do, I started going to those prayer meetings, and we prayed for 2 months over that area, specifically for all those people there before we were going to go in. And I saw it in my mind's eye as bombarding the enemy prior to going in. And when we went in, the morning we went in, I had moved back to my parents' house prior to that. I woke up on that Saturday morning, and the spirit of fear was so heavy on me. It was like a lead blanket, man. And it was like, I had already dealt with that before for other things, but this time it was real powerful. And it was like, I couldn't even open my mouth. My mouth was frozen. That's how fearful it was. And I was like, I am not going to let the devil win. And I started praying in tongues under my breath, just slowly. And as I'm praying, all of a sudden I see this vision of big, green, healthy oak trees. I'm like, man, what is that? And immediately I saw all these smiling faces in those trees. And then I started laughing because I realized immediately that those were the smiling faces of all the people being delivered out of the devil's hands and into the kingdom of light, becoming oaks of righteousness. And I thought, that's what the Bible says, become an oak of righteousness. Well, planted by the streams of the Lord and all that. And I just started laughing with joy, man. The spirit of fear was gone that quick. I mean, it was gone, defeated. So I go to meet the church, and we, met at this street corner, had a prayer, and then we all get assigned to go 2 by 2. And by the way, that is the way to go. Let me tell you, that Jesus said he sent them, the disciples, 2 by 2. You don't go alone, believe me. I mean, if you're in a situation where you are alone and it comes upon you, that's different. But when you go out to do it, you better be 2 by 2. That is the way Jesus said to do it, and he has a reason for that. So anyway, I get linked up with this heavy black girl named Tina, and I'm thinking, isn't that something? Little white guy, little skinny white guy, and a big fat black girl. This will be great. And I thought, I don't care, man. You know what? I'm not too proud. And she was a nice girl too. And she said, how are you doing today? I said, man, I'm doing great. How are you? And she said, I am scared to death. And she said, I grew up here. I know these people. And I said, man, that spirit of fear hit me today too. And I told her the whole story. And then she just burst out laughing just like I did. And she said, I could do this now. I could do this now. And so that was the beginning of more and more major spiritual experiences, which I can get into another time. I can tell those stories another time. But let me tell you something, man. God showed up big time. And I started loving it so much, man. I wanted to go other times when the church wasn't scheduled to go. And God started using me in mighty, mighty ways. And man, I could tell some stories, which I will at another time. Let me think. I think there was something else I was going to mention. But I can tell you this. The devil is no match for God. That's why the Bible says light pierces the darkness, and light dispels darkness, and the darkness cannot overpower it. When you know Jesus Christ as your Savior, and by the way, don't ever try to cast out demons if you are not a born-again Christian, or deal with demons. Man, you just cannot. You do not have the power, and you have got to be living a holy life too, man, because it's like chinks in your armor if you're out in the battlefield spiritually with demons. You want to be as righteous, living righteously as you can, not fooling around with anything, because it will be a downfall for you. So anyway, that's kind of the main part of it. I might do this thing over again sometime because I'm sure I missed some things, but that's kind of it. Hope you enjoyed it. Okay, thanks.